Wonderful. Shall we get started? Great. Okay, I'm going to kick it off. And let me know if you can hear me okay. Great. Okay. All right. Welcome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second season of the Defiant Optimist series. This is a program that brings together some of the boldest and most innovative leaders who are making finance work for the 99%. My name is Jennifer Chen, and I'll be your MC for today, along with Sorel Henriquez, who will be helping to moderate the Q&A session during the second half of the webinar. Our episode today brings us to a conversation with Ms. Preeti Sinha, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Capital Development Fund, or UNCDF, and how we're going to address the very urgent financing gaps standing in the way of achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Before that, we will have a brief presentation by Natasha Garcia, Director of Innovative Finance at IEX, before moving into the conversation with our very own CEO, Professor Doreen Shanaz. So before we get started, let me just share a few words on the tech side. If this is your first time joining us, please note that you will be kept on mute throughout the webinar, but we invite you to share your reactions and comments as you listen. So feel free to ask questions, and you can do this by clicking on the Q&A icon on the right panel of your screen. And don't forget to vote for your favorite questions by pressing the like button, and we'll be sure to get to the ones with the most likes towards the end of the webinar. And to our Defiant Optimist annual pass subscribers and those who have received special backstage access, do make sure to stay with us till the end of the event for an exclusive chat. If you run into any tech issues, my colleagues Audrey and Denise both are ready on standby, so please do reach out if needed. So before we dive in, let me briefly introduce the series to those who are joining us for the first time. The Defiant Optimist is a webinar series by IEX that features leaders in finance and sustainable development. So this is more than a conversation between two people. It's really a chance to dive deep into the stories of these people and people who have the potential to reshape financial markets and make them work for the 99%. And more importantly, it's also a chance for you to find your path in the movement as that we're creating together. So we had a very exciting season one where we focused on COVID recovery, and we did this with various leaders from UN Women and UNESCAP to the Inter-American Development Bank, and with global investors like Nuveen, who oversees the US Teachers Pension Fund. And so for this season, we're looking into resilience and why we need to find optimists who can really reshape the world to build a more just and equitable system. So for those who know IEX, Defiant Optimism is very much a part of its DNA. Here it means rolling up sleeves, doing the work to empower women in underserved communities at the last mile. And we also know that this takes an incredible amount of innovation. So that's why through innovative finance, we have built infrastructures for a new financial system where women and the underserved are given a voice and a value. And nothing epitomizes that more than the Women's Livelihood Bond series. So that's why I'm really happy to invite Natasha Garcia to share more about what innovative finance looks like on the ground. Natasha is the Director of Innovative Finance at IEX, where she works on gender lens investing initiatives and impact measurement work in the Asia Pacific, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and the United States. Her team focuses on structuring, impact assessment, and investor relations for the Women's Livelihood Bond series, which is the world's first and still the only gender lens social bond listed on a stock exchange. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Natasha.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's such an honor to be part of the session today. The Women's Livelihood Bond series, as Jennifer said, is really broke new ground in 2017 when the ICMA started the social bonds, and we were the first social bond that was unapologetically focused on women. It's been fascinating to see we continue to be one of the only social bonds also designed by women. Many of us at IEX are women of color as well. And that gave us a unique perspective to design a bond that goes beyond just investing in having a few women on the board for an ESG purpose, to really going to the very last mile to empower hundreds of thousands of women in emerging markets to build resilience and to build back better, which has proved to be extremely critical in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, when women are 1.8 times more likely to drop out of the labor force as compared to their male counterparts. And gender equality is critical to building back better and to building COVID resilience communities. And I say we, but I also want to highlight that it's been fantastic to see the kind of partnerships that this innovative structure of the Women's Livelihood Bond has managed to pull together to drive forward and to catalyze the broader gender lens investment movement. We have a number of banks, law firms, and government bodies, including the United States and Australia, among others, who worked with us to build this series. And also very happy to have the United Nations as a partner, and you'll hear from Ms. Sinha from UNCDF shortly. So very excited to work with them on our second and third issuances as well. To date, we've mobilized over 48 million, and our reports just came in a few weeks ago. As of earlier this year, in July, we impacted about 870,000 women and girls across South and Southeast Asia. If we go to the next slide, I think it's been fabulous to see that when you empower a woman, you don't just empower her, you empower an entire community as well. There's a ripple effect of when you advance SDG 5, which is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal on gender equality, you actually are able to address a wide host of sustainable development issues that exist in the world today. Everything from no poverty, because women are more subjected to income inequality, to climate action, which is a big cornerstone of our next bond as well. And if you go to that next slide, I'm happy to also say the reason we're able to do this is because of the innovative structure that we've built. This is a multi-country, multi-sector portfolio of high-impact SMEs focused on women that come into these bonds from across South and Southeast Asia and across a range of sectors, which you see in the bottom panel of the screen. And because of that diversification and that balance of risk, return, and impact, we're able to attract investors from across the world, everywhere from the United States. Jennifer mentioned Naveen, who's been on the session before, to investors in New Zealand. And it has been fantastic to see the way the market has reacted to the security. And this has given us the confidence to do another one later this year. If we go to the next slide, I can give you a brief overview of that issuance as well. We're looking at doing this later this year. We're expecting this bond will focus not just on women's livelihoods, but also the important role that women play in climate action and the race to zero emissions. We will be empowering 500,000 women and girls to act as solutions, both to build back better, but also this time, very importantly, to mitigate climate change by transitioning them to clean energy, and also being better equipped to adapt to climate change through access to agriculture, in addition to many other sectors we focus on, including mobility lending, skills development, and financial inclusion. And on the last slide, again, because of all this work and this, the novel approach we have of making sure women are front and center of capital markets, which has never really been done before, and in honor of their resilience as well, we've received a number of awards from organizations at the UN General Assembly in 2019. We were given the UN Global Climate Action Award and the Partnership for Good Award for advancing the most SDGs, and also just going beyond ESG through the Tokyo Financial Award and our partners being recognized through the Financial Times Responsible Law Firm Award. So it's been a true honor to see that this instrument is being recognized across capital markets and from a range of players in the ecosystem. And we're very honored to be a part of the solution to build back better through gender equality. With that, I thank you all very much. I'm happy to hand it back over to Jennifer to moderate the session. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Natasha. Now, for our speakers today, we are very excited to welcome IX's CEO and founder and a global leader in sustainable investing, Professor Doreen Shanaz. We'll also be joined by our special guest, Executive Secretary of UNCDF, Ms. Preeti Sinha, who will be introduced shortly. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Professor Shanaz to take it away and kick off our session.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Natasha, for the great presentation. This is a great start, and welcome to all of you, Defiant Optimists. So really, really wonderful to see you all. I think, it is important for us to sort of step back and really look at where we all stand with the context right now of the ecosystem financing and the tools that are available, for the impact enterprises and the impact enterprises who are actually the backbone of the society. How will we address the roadblocks that are facing them now, the roadblocks that are facing women? And how can we actually play a catalytic role and a catalytic capital, that role that can play to deliver on these promises in terms of really reaching the sustainable development goal that we all would like to still reach. With this, I can't imagine a better guest today, and I would love to welcome you all along with me to introduce our guest for this session, the inspirational Ms. Preeti Sinha, who is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Ms. Sinha is a global experienced investment and development banker with a 30-year track record in raising and managing public and private development capital. Prior to her appointment at UNCDF, she was the CEO and president of FDD, Financing for Development, a firm focused on financing the Sustainable Development Goals. She also has extensive experience with think tanks and resource mobilization in India and Africa, and frankly, across the globe. And with her work, she has also led, with her work has reached out to millions across the globe, through the UN and also the other organizations such as the World Economic Forum. Preeti, welcome to the series, and thank you very much, for joining us today. I would like to kick off things by inviting you to share a little bit more about your tireless work that you have done over the last 3 decades to really bring capital to the last mile. So let's start off by you sharing these experiences that shaped your career and your path. Was there a defining moment that you had to lead with defiant optimism and really make sure your work goes to that last mile? So with that, Preeti, please join us.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you so much, and for that warm welcome and our continued partnership, friendship, and also to your team for that wonderful presentation. I'm always so inspired by the women's livelihood bonds. But for me, thanks. Let me reflect back now. So first, before starting, I know this series is called The Defiant Optimist. I've often been called the Uber Optimist. So I hope that rings true.
Absolutely, yeah.
A happy panda, as they said. But really, I do that while I look at the extreme challenges in the world, and those extreme challenges, the desperation, the urgency of the desperation of people's lives drives me. It is very unfortunate that as the human race that we have not been able to provide basic standard of living for all humans. And I would just consider this as one entity of the human race, and that makes it responsible for us to make sure that everybody, can live a human life. So that really answers somewhere your question on the defining moment. Let me just build on 2. So basically, my life journey started in India, which is great parents and great education. At the age of 18, I received a big envelope on a hot summer day which said, you're going to Dartmouth College in the USA. I just had a life ambition at the age of 15 to travel the world. So in that life ambition, according to that, I hope by now I am a billionaire, according to that definition of having really been able to travel the world. But so here I came to Dartmouth at the age of 18, an Indian girl, different cultural values. But the ultimate defining moment came is when I joined investment banking. I was there for 5-6 years. And I used to travel back to India or other developing parts of the world. When you see slums and you see street kids, these 2 things really, really bother me, that humanity is at that juncture of a kid has to beg on the street for whatever reasons, or humans are living in slum-like conditions. So basically, the defining moment was when I decided to finish my career in investment banking. I literally threw my corporate finance, Riley and Myers books in the dustbin. I don't know.
Brilliant Myers, yep.
Yeah, I remember those from our generation of business school.
Yes.
They're cherished Black-Scholes option models, but I cherished my years at investment bank. It was about showing how big capital can move. But I just thought arbitraging capital for a couple of basis points and feeling that that's the use of capital didn't seem right to me. So my motto is capital needs to serve humanity. That's what I believe in. So first, capital is something we've created socially. So why shouldn't it help us improve lives? Anyway, that's perhaps an answer. And that led me on a trajectory of development finance. And I tried to intensify it more and more until this junction when I'm at the United Nations.
Well, I think the journey took you to the right place. With your Uber capitalism, you are at absolutely the helm of bringing development and finance together. So now, at UNCDF, where it's really the only organization among kind of the whole, I would say, the UN family, which deals very directly with capital, right? You're dealing with capital, you're dealing with governments, you're dealing with this big private sector players. And you really are catalyzing capital for the 47, the least developing countries across Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. Now, even before COVID-19, all these continents, it was challenging to kind of bring capital and actually meet even the SDG goals, right? In all these places in which, I would say still the 99%, right, of the global population. Now, the World Bank has estimated that 100 to 150 million people would be pushed into extreme poverty. And, in the last 2 years, with the pandemic. Now, with this disruption in the global economy, I mean, how are we going to move in terms of providing relief and that progress, that is needed at the pace and scale to really sort of start building some resilience into the system? Because it feels like there has not been enough relief yet and resilience is still far away. So, what is your thought on that, and what role can capital play in all of this?
Doreen, indeed a very deep and profound question, but let's try to start to answer it. So yes, I think just for the listeners, maybe I'll spend just a minute saying what UN Capital Development Fund is in case they haven't stumbled upon us before.
Yes.
Really, as you know, the United Nations is owned by 193 nations. So we are literally one vote, one country. And therefore, the developing country members back in 1966 said, we want a fund for the least of the developed countries. So somewhat like an IDA equivalent. IDA is the World Bank's concessional fund. So that was the image that was projected. And that has continued. The least developed of the countries have asked the United Nations to make sure that there's an entity that works with them, in partnership with them. So the UN Capital Development Fund has then evolved over the last few decades, and here we are today in 2022 at a very pivotal point. I think I'll resonate your concerns, the challenges, but the challenges are also pushing us in the right direction to say, I really feel very responsible as the Executive Secretary of UNCDF. I really feel a sense of responsibility to represent the 46 now of the least developed countries. These are countries where per capita income is below $1,000 a year. And so our entire focus is on these countries. What we do offer is a strong sense of partnership, our alliance, our affiliation, our faith, our loyalty into these countries. So what we try to do in terms of instruments, and again, why we are different, we are in the UN system is, in that initial formation, they left us with instruments like loans and guarantees. Now we're doing blended funds and bonds. We really hope we are converting the UN's mission into tangible structures, instruments that can help lives. And the way we help lives, we focus on SMEs, really on the ground, the last mile in these last frontier markets, as I like to call them. So we take a woman who comes up to us and says, I want to start a groundnut factory in Malawi. And we'll give her a grant, and then we'll give her a loan, and that then enables her to become a credit-worthy entity that can go to the local bank and get a loan from there. But without these kind of assisting products that we could provide, she is sometimes not able to get off the ground. And then what we do is we convene the ministers, we convene our local office, and we bring this entrepreneur to show her story, to tell her story, so that the country itself can do much more in this direction in the future. So in particular, I really believe that all countries, all people in the world have the ability to establish that basic standard of living for themselves and for their citizens. So sometimes we must have faith in these countries. And I like to pick, of course, then, and to work with the leaders, the governance, where they show this initiative. And I'm delighted to tell you, or just on Monday, I was in Tanzania. And Tanzania, I met with President Samia Suluhu Hassan. And I'm so pleased to meet this woman leader, the president of Tanzania, and to see her reformist ideas on democracy, on development, and on getting innovative finance into Tanzania. So just to say, SMEs is a big area. And then with Tanzania, we discussed municipal financing. So being at that local level, trying to create infrastructure, bus terminals, energy, so that people can again try to get a livelihood for themselves. And we've been doing this historically, but we intensified it during COVID. And COVID, as you know, has impacted for certain, businesses, tourism, livelihoods. But we hope some of us defiant people are in the market, and we hope that we can do more. We are hoping to scale so that we can do more, and we will definitely remain in this last mile, in these last frontier markets, and with great partners like yourself, and shown great examples of how it can be done. We hope to continue the journey.
No, this is wonderful, Preeti. And I think, what you just mentioned, I think it's, we are seeing, incredible sort of strides in terms of politics and finance, coming together in a lot of these countries. And you do see that that's needed in terms of where gender is concerned, right? So I think just to sort of go a little deep on that, I mean, you talked about your experience now, you're in this, I have to mention to the audience that you're actually doing this call from a hotel room in Sweden. So Preeti has been on the road for a while now, and she's in Sweden, and then you'll be going for the COP 26. So thank you for making the time for us. I know you're so busy. But just going back to your time in the last few days in Tanzania, and working in the government in terms of creating the infrastructure in a municipal level, these are all needed. But how is this different from what has been done for the last 70 years by World Bank or by the UN? And how is it actually bringing in the gender angle? Are we doing the same thing over and over again? Or are we actually trying to do things differently from UNCDF and really ensuring that we do have a way to create some sort of sustainability, and then also ensuring that the gender perspective, the gender equality, SDG 5, is very much live?
Well, thanks, Doreen. Again, such a great question. Let me say what the difference is. I really believe we need to bring now to the discussion a humanitarian and a planetary consideration to the capital markets. And I know I admire you so greatly for being one of those pioneers who's managed to connect capital markets to women's livelihoods. But in this case, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to take these countries, so Tanzania, Malawi, Gambia, Liberia, Guinea at some point, Senegal, and take them to the global capital markets, have them speak to the PIMCOs of the world, the alliances, those who manage trillions of dollars of funding. And why not? Why not find ways of investing trillions of dollars assets? I mean, we just need a portion of them, but to find ways of mitigating them, we need particularly de-risking and certain amount of guarantees, etc. But somehow to bring that to this last mile. And let me give you an example of what we're trying to do. Right now I'm in Sweden, so let me give you a Swedish example. We work on guarantees. We work on guarantees just like SIDA, the Swedish Development Agency, does. So here, it's not our product, but our colleague worked on it. In a sense, Danske Bank, it's a commercial bank, issued kind of an SPV into which two pension funds put 177 million, which is then passed on to an impact fund to invest in the SMEs. And we worked on the guarantee, or on the SIDA guarantee, on the portfolio. So the path from the big capital to the small entrepreneur is not going to be direct, but I think there is a path. And we're seeing more examples. And again, I'll refer back to people who may not know your wonderful work on women's livelihood bonds, that exists. You've shown the market how that's done. And we hope to replicate those into other products, other issues regarding women, regarding climate as well. We're on the cusp of a climate debate. So obviously, we'll be looking at that. But in Tanzania, it's for us the same thing. In everything we do, we want to make sure at least 50 to 60% of the portfolio are run or represented by women. So in the entrepreneurs, we look for women entrepreneurs. We have Kombeza, another dairy company in Rwanda that's led very successfully by women. And also in the municipality work, we are looking at a concept called inclusivity. So we can make sure that there's street lighting, there's safety aspects, etc., which are important when women get to work and become very empowered parts of the economic debate. So, again, no better than you to tell us more, but that we are certainly making sure that women are part of our agenda.
No, I mean, those are good points. I mean, I think just to kind of, for the perspective of our audience, I guess in these countries, the difference also is the fact that traditionally, since I guess the Second World War and the Bretton Woods, etc., the way development was practiced was really the fact that you had these multilaterals coming in and sort of trying to decide what the country needs, and very sort of top down. And any sort of involvement of these countries or the enterprises in the countries with the global market, financial market, was completely absent, right? So I think, so Preeti, what you're doing is actually that really groundbreaking work, which really allowing for the people and the enterprises in these countries to have the ability and the independence to go to these markets and be able to grow the way they need to be growing, and basically reap their own benefits, right? Rather than a lot of the multilaterals, which also happen, would come in and do their things. Of course, they still have a role to play. So I think it is this incredible shift that's happening globally in terms of really using the financial market. So it's really, really nice to see how UNCDF is putting itself in these different buckets and layers, right? And playing the role of an enabler, I guess.
Yes.
Right?
So, for example, again, I was so impressed by President Hassan of Tanzania. So at COP, we are, of course, making a meeting for her with the Green Climate Fund. And we would like to see the Green Climate Fund give money directly to Tanzania, make sure that, some of the climate work is met. And then, just as a woman leader of Africa, I'd love to take her to meet some of our big banks around the world that and let them have a discussion. Let a JP Morgan CEO speak to a Tanzanian president and see what comes out of it. So because, we represent within the LDCs 1 billion people with 20% of the world's youth as well. And they all live at $1.9 or something in a day, which is less. Anyway, so that's the debate. And what I'd like to see in 2 years, that's my optimism, that our capital markets look very different. We currently have a rhino bond issued by, Credit Suisse, but I'd like elephant bonds and other planetary, biodiversity targets. And here, just to mention, Sweden's very big as well, and everybody's starting to biodiversity, but also women's bonds, and also a bit of, even in the crisis situation, bonds to reconstruct Syria, Haiti, Afghanistan. I mean, things that we could bring these human elements. If we could measure what it takes to take a human from extreme poverty to basic standard of living, that amount of, and make it an investable item for human, human development, all of this, everybody to have basic standard of living.
Right. And I think, again, so I think and that is sort of the world we are working towards. And I'm so, incredibly impressed that more and more women are now a part of this dialogue and discussion, because frankly, that's what we need. And I think, sort of going a little deep with that, I mean, you have made great strides, since the beginning of your tenure this year, in many different things, and including 2 new programs to support the development of digital economies in the Pacific region, and the global partnership to empower small and micro businesses through digital and financial literacy. And I guess this was a partnership with Visa. So how important do you think this digital transformation is for financial inclusion, as we work towards that elusive goal of 2030 SDG, which we still need to push for? and especially for women who have, very little access, to capital, as well as any type of education also, that the digital transformation can offer. I mean, what are you seeing already? How is it doing, good or not, or is it tough? I mean, share with us.
Doreen, I'm such a big believer in the mobile phone and the connectivity. I think it transforms lives. So I have to just narrate one incident. I was having a room painted in India, and there were 5 painters in the room, in the paint-soaked clothes. And there were 5 mobile phones plugged into the room. Every plug point was taken. And I was so delighted by that. That means, though, that they have access to a lot more than perhaps their livelihood status might indicate, in the sense that they could access bank accounts, mobile bank accounts, could make transfers, perhaps get some of the social benefits directly into their bank accounts. And of course, for us women, and enabling women to do that is a special part. So just to say, one of our teams, it's a 100-member team called the Inclusive Digital Economies. And it has a very, very strong gender focus. Actually, through that, we've been part of the Generation Equality Forum, which, happened in Mexico and in Paris. And we've created our own theme to say equal economies, with gender finance gap zero and red tape gap zero, bringing down all that regulatory aspects that sometimes women face. So yes, in Papua New Guinea, let me tell you this beautiful example. We funded a bank called Mama Bank to enable the biometric signatures by women, because unfortunately, even in this day and age, some women aren't able to have literacy. So we wanted to ensure that at least they have bank accounts and they could use their thumbprints and other biometric measures to have bank accounts. Then we gave a loan to Mama Bank so that it could then become the microfinance provider of loans to these women. So we hope that we've impacted a number of women in Papua New Guinea. And I saw a BBC series on the country, and it was a little bit difficult, to see that women are still struggling there to that extent. But we've tried to replicate such models across the world. We do work with our partner agency, UN Women, to also create guarantees around banks, so encouraging banks to do more lending to women. So the digital aspect is key to everything we do. And you'll see that in examples across the world. Right now, we are in Zambia at the moment, trying to get digitally enabled SMEs more access to credit. So we try to combine technology and capital together, but really believe in it, and really believe that, wouldn't it be wonderful if the LDCs came up with the next, innovation model. So just for example, I was in Abu Dhabi recently, and in Dubai, in the UAE, and we have Sahelia. Sahelia is a solar company from Burkina Faso. And he was on the stage with the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development. And he said, next stage, I want blockchain in solar energy so that there's no leakage of, the payments. And it was so wonderful to hear from Burkina Faso that he's thinking of blockchain. And why not? In this case, he was a very able, talented, educated young man starting a great new business. So I think hearing great examples of technology innovations from these countries really warms my heart.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think, interestingly, what we are seeing, because we really are in the last mile, is there is no dearth of ideas. There's no dearth of, I would say, to soak up the digital need. But what there is dearth of is really, I would say, an unbroken value chain of how the capital can flow. And I think that is very interesting, right? So, if you think about it, UNCDF's work, where it ends, still someone needs to pick it up, because the reality is that we all have to kind of play a role in this sort of a global village of capital market. And I think that sometimes gets missing. So I hope this young man gets his money in Burkina Faso, because I can just completely see it, all the obstacles, right, that he's going to face in terms of, if it's a fund who comes in and says, oh, okay, well, how are you going to get the network? How are you going to actually make sure that, you are ensuring that we're going to get our return that we want? Yeah, if you're making this impact, are you actually, how do we know it's actually the real impact? So I think it is very interesting where, we have seen in the last 12 years that there is a whole ecosystem that needs to be created, right? And I think that is also something that needs to go hand in hand while, UNCDF is coming in and playing a role, perhaps from the government level, but then there is all these other pieces that needs to come together. So I think it is important, and I think it's I hope these discussions will actually allow for others to see that sometimes when the discussions are happening here, it's very difficult to actually figure out what's happening over here, right? So if you think about it, your example in Papua New Guinea, when you were saying it, I was actually thinking back, and I was thinking when I was at Grameen Bank, 30 years ago, one of my most, defining moments were when we taught these women how to sign. Because that one act of signing was an incredible act of empowerment, right? So I think it's very, very interesting. So I do think sometimes, that gets missing, in terms of when we are looking at the big finances and really kind of ensuring that last mile is a part of that equation. So I think it's remarkable what you're doing, and I think it'll be nice to be able to also sort of see the next steps, in these countries and how we make this happen. Now, just going a little kind of a deeper with it, Preeti, tell us a little bit about the impact pathways that you have also developed, right? I mean, is this part of this whole digital thing? I believe you're working on this with some of the developing countries and the policy level. Can you share some of that with us?
Sure. Maybe the best way to answer it is our new strategic framework, which will be issued in January, just after the LDC-5. LDC-5 is the next 10-year declaration of what the LDCs need for them, as their growth and development. But just to say, our headline, impact statement is these economies are equal, prosperous, inclusive, diversified, and green, right? So then we try to, in the impact pathways, we have about 5 indicators, perhaps referring to each of those words, of how we've helped or how we've seen these countries evolve in those impact measures. Then we go to the next level, where we measure ourselves on 3 dimensions. Did we catalyze more capital for these countries? Did we create market systems, which means more the regulatory policy aspects? Did we create or accelerate their growth towards inclusive and green economies? So then we measured those aspects, just to find indicators that could prove that there was impact there. And as you know, we are a 350-member organization, and 300 are on the ground. So, I mean, they can literally, really look at these measures. And then just coming a layer below, so that's the impact, outcome, and the output is our 5 sectors that we are focused on. So traditionally, we've done the big digital investment, our flagship area. Another one is the municipal flagship area. But now in our new strategic framework, we are going to finance women economic empowerment. That's being highlighted as one of the new areas. Then on climate, energy, biodiversity as a group, and on food systems, because people are really getting impacted on hunger with COVID. So each of them, everything we do through the SMEs, through the infrastructure, through the investment product, will have that impact figure: number of women reached, number of cell phones, in people's hands, number of mobile money, and number of, access to transport, etc. But what I'd like to referring back to your previous question, though, I mean, to create a wholesome picture of how we work, we work with the governments, right? So we have the access as United Nations to the management, to the governance. Then we try to create enabling policy environments, because that's the role of government. Right. And then we work, across through the SME platforms and etc. into the last mile. And actually, we are where nobody else is, using a Star Trek phrase now. There aren't enough players who are, enough in that last mile, and we won't let go of our hand with the last mile SMEs until we get them to that next mile. That's where the other DFIs could come in. So what we find perhaps a gap is this missing middle. Enterprises between 250,000 to 2.5 million, that kind of financing that is needed, too big for microfinance, too small for impact or DFIs. So we stay with them till we can hand them off perhaps to the next phase. But even in handing them off, we've created our own blended fund. It's called the Build Fund, with Bamboo Capital out of Luxembourg, 250 million, first loss 50 million. And I know this terms may be interesting to some. But basically, this fund will invest in SMEs and LDCs in that range, 250K to 2.5 million. Let me ask, how many impact investors are kind of going down to that scale? Because it's challenging. But we believe in high risk, high impact. That's us. And we hope others may join us, or others may let us scale, so that, there's plenty of work to be done. And, we want to be across all these countries to do that. So just to say, the model is to work with government and just to kind of put it all together. It's with governments and enterprises. And those are some of our measures that I just outlined. That's what our measures would look like, impact measures.
Right. That's fantastic. And I think, you're absolutely right. I think that missing middle is really something that can catalyze these economies, to the next level. Now, interestingly, if we now look at we're now in this COVID world, it looks like it's going to be, sadly, we have to live with it for a while. And there seems to be, looking at some of the numbers, recently OECD has stated that the developing countries will face a shortfall of almost $1.7 trillion in public and private sector financing. So while a fund obviously is needed, what's also really needed is this catalytic nature of capital. So just for our audience, what catalytic capital means is exactly what the word sounds like, which is, it's almost like, imagine it's a jumping board, right? So that capital sort of acts as that, and it allows for you to go to bigger heights, in this case, get more capital just because you're providing that sort of risk. So UNCDF obviously does that very effectively in providing that catalytic capital. Now, this, couple of $1 trillion of gap that's being created in the market, which of course will exacerbate, sort of an economic spiral. We're already sort of seeing signs of this. What can we do, sort of in your experience? I mean, what can we do to create a common ground, between sort of the development world, economic development world, and the expert and the private sector institutions, so that we can actually bring it a little closer, because now it's a huge gap. And what do you think is the biggest hurdle, in terms of bringing these two together, at least closer, I should say? Is it the capital? Do we need more of that? Do we need more dialogue? Do we need more, policy changes? I mean, what is needed for us to come closer? What would you say?
I think we need to build bridges between public and private capital, and to do that, we need some bridge builders. So we need, Doreen, I'll refer to you and me, people like some of us who've worked both for the investment side and the development side, because we are able to speak both the languages. We're able to understand the language of both sides, because sometimes the language of the two sides are different, and then they don't particularly, cross over the bridge. So, for example, in 2005, I was at the World Economic Forum. I was a fellow there, and I brought 5 multilateral banks in the same room as 5 investment banks. And I remember one investment bank saying, I'm not going to this country unless you make it single A credit with your guarantee. So the role of guarantee in this current crisis-ridden world, I mean, the COVID world, is very important, because private capital will not necessarily move much until it sees some sort of risk mitigation. But encourage public capital, all the MTP money and all the other capitals, to perhaps create some kind of risk mitigation, and then actively engage with the private capital to challenge them, saying, there's a risk cover, now isn't that sufficient? Now, come on, let's go for it. So in Gambia, we gave a $9 million guarantee on a solar plant, and that's brought in 15 million. So that's a bit of the bridging that needs to be done. But many other factors, like I mentioned, very important that these countries are on the same table as the big investors. So we created, one conference in the FFD forum. We had Allianz there, IFC, as CEDA, and then we brought Malawi and ourselves. And the Malawi minister was able to add such dimensions that, the capital providers had not really heard of on a panel. So I think hearing the voice and really encouraging them to be on the table. And then another thing we're doing is helping sovereign ratings for these countries. We feel the capital markets, for good or bad, is a little bit run on the rating. So that's a sense of, how well the country is doing. It's a scorecard. Now, we want to work with these countries to help them through their reform process, through the narrative the consistent narrative. And what big capital is saying, we need to hear a consistent narrative. It might include reforms, but do not flip-flop. So keep constant. And we had the case of Benin that just raised 500 million euros on the market. It's an SDG bond, and it was 5.2%, and then they got 20 basis points off for being an SDG bond. And I know our favorite topic together are the orange bonds, so let me bring that into the conversation. We want together, issue orange bonds, which are women-led, women-based, focused bonds, and we're calling it orange for the SDG color of SDG 5. So I think those kinds of instruments are really challenging somewhat the conversation with private capital, but still providing them with a very mathematical risk mitigation accompanying the instrument. I think that's what will change the dialogue in the years to come.
So let's go. We'll talk about orange bond. I'm keeping that for the last. So let's tantalize the audience a little bit about that. But before we get there, let me go a little deeper with some of the topics that I like to sort of push on a little bit, because I do think that while you call yourself the Uber optimist, I am the Defiant optimist. So let's have Uber and Defiance kind of come together here a little bit. We do see that now in impact investing space, the sustainable finance space, there's so much talk of people, doing good. You're hearing about these billion-dollar funds, the private equity funds. You're hearing about the SPACs, for our audience, it's the special purpose acquisition companies. I mean, Lord, this is going to be the next thing that blows up. And we have all these ESG funds, who are claiming to deliver sustainable finance. So, billion is almost like a no number. It's like billion, you're any short of $1 billion fund. I mean, what are you doing, right? But the reality is, we know for a fact, there is a lot of the washing that's going on, right? So I feel like in almost it's the financial market, a lot of the players are playing on the naivety of, I would say, the common 99%, and people want to hear, the young people are marching on the streets, for climate and all this. They're like, yeah, we have another $1 billion fund to take care of climate. But is it really doing it? And we know it's not. So what I want to sort of push on is, how will sort of UNCDF play a role in educating the stakeholders to really ensure that we are having that real impact, that we are actually not having, yet another investment bank issuing a green bond, but it's really not that green, right? Yet another PE fund saying it's an impact fund, and yet you have the entire board, of basically Caucasian male, and they're talking about helping the South, the global South. So how is UNCDF actually playing a role in changing that dialogue, in actually, pointing out that the empire is wearing no clothes? I mean, how is UNCDF doing that, or how will it do it?
So in the context of Defiant Optimist, I'd like to sort of outline a couple of visions I've had. And one of them for certain is, I want to see more leaders from sort of, if you call it the global South or the developing countries. I want to see the development world being run by leaders of the developing countries, perhaps educated globally. So again, they speak both the languages. They have this deep understanding of the urgency, of the desperation of people's lives, but they have the global voice as well. And I want development organizations to be run in a majority by these, because I feel unless you understand the mindset of what's happening in Mozambique, in Sudan, in Pakistan, in across the world, in Fiji, we need representation from there on the table as well. So that will drive capital, because in the sense they will understand what the capital is saying, at the same time being able to sort of galvanize their own country or regions to meet those needs. And one thing you mentioned, youth. So let me also mention what I think is the future of the world as well, that governance changes. The head of state for me is a public service, right? So what I want for the youth is that we have a number of public policy schools around the world that make the youth think of public policy and governance as a career. So not enough youth are going into that field. So let's say in 5 years, in a generation, we have a very young government across the world, very young governments that shape policy differently. So having just said those two things that I really wanted to get in there, coming back to the capital markets, yes. So I think once you have very diverse perspective, I would bring in the word diversity, and diversity accompanied by standard settings. So right now there are a lot of standard settings for the climate world. I think we need similar standard settings for women, for biodiversity, etc. And so the more we can, and again, run by true believers, certainly representing and investing in these countries to make sure that, them setting the standards, then I believe capital will have a fairer allocation to these countries.
Right. Preeti, you're my dear friend, and as I always say, I'm glad you are running UNCDF because you are the diplomat. So it's interesting. I will have to say though, your public policy schools, when I was a professor at the LKY school, I always used to start my class saying, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm teaching this class because none of you will, I don't think any of you will ever be an entrepreneur, but what you will do is you can make an entrepreneur's life miserable. So this is my job to make sure you have some understanding how entrepreneurs work and how you can actually make someone's life. So I'm glad you brought up the public policy schools. And I think in terms of all the billions of dollars and billion-dollar funds, I think you're absolutely right. It is our responsibility to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And now UNCDF and IX has announced the Orange Bond Initiative last month at the UN General Assembly, which you alluded to. So we can now talk about that. I'm very excited about that. And just for everyone else, the Orange Bond Initiative is really taking on the whole notion of orange being the color of SDG 5, and really going out there with the whole sense that the new type of bond is needed, which puts women at the center of the center of financial markets. So Women's Livelihood Bond is a first example of an orange bond. And with this initiative of Orange Bond, we hope with UNCDF and IX that we will do groundbreaking work in partnership of the public and the private sectors. We'll have a public sector, people helping all these entrepreneurs, and really be able to create this interface and dialogue and also instruments as a catalyst, for the financial market, for women. So we are extremely excited about that. So just to kind of give everyone a little bit of flavor, I know, we're still in the works of it and pulling it together, Preeti. So this is sort of us two friends talking. So how do you think we can encourage the people who are listening to this today, which is, it's a big audience, in terms of really doing their part in an initiative like this? How can we make it very inclusive and create our village right here today with our audience?
Well, I can't be at a better place to address that than in Sweden, a part of the Nordic world, as you know. So here, of course, you see examples of women being equal parts of the economy. So basically, just to have that message, there are only two genders, there aren't 10. So of the two, biologically, evolutionarily, historically, women have had this is no surprise, but just a more consensus-driven, more caring. I mean, women have been mothers, etc. So I think bringing women into the picture and therefore financing women orange bonds, I feel would just be perhaps the mechanism to save the world in many ways, that, we really care. So I think the word care for the planet, care for the people, bringing a more consensus-driven, caring attitude into leadership and therefore into business as well. And that's why I think orange bonds are important. I want to see women empowerment. I mean, just take my example. I was a STEM girl. My parents, encouraged my education. And hopefully, I hope my team believes I'm sort of mama care as well. So I really feel I try to run my team in a very compassionate manner, making sure that they perform well, but also empowering them. So those, and I mean, this is also related to evidence of, I have two doctor friends who work, let's say in Africa, and they are so, disturbed by some of the medical situations they see of children. So the children's medical situation depends on the mother as well. So therefore, just getting women more empowered, getting girls in school, and so therefore all enterprises that lead to such aspects is what we want the orange bonds to invest in. So we'll make sure there's no orange washing at all. Doreen and I are firm believers in that, and really being on the ground and really talking and identifying such companies that will really change the world.
Yes, and just to add to that, I think it is important to ensure that it is about women empowerment, and the women empowerment happens in many different ways. In terms of really having the opportunity and having the livelihood, having the access, affordability, all of these things in terms of services, financial inclusion. All these impact women in the last mile to a greater degree. And as we know, the COVID has hit women disproportionately more than men. Why? Because they are taking the brunt of it. And even in developed countries, we're seeing a lot of women who have now stopped working, because of lack of childcare. So it is sort of an issue that has a domino effect. So we hope that we can address all this by having a series of facts there in the financial markets, which addresses it. So we are very, very hopeful, and we are excited about it. So Preeti, this was great. So now we're going to, I'm of course supremely, over, but it was so wonderful to talk to a friend, in this setup. So I will end with what we call sort of a lightning round, which is always fun. It always ends it with in a note of the fact that all the Defiant optimists who come to this, to these sessions have a whole human side, and in your case being the uber optimist. So let's jump in. So there's a series of questions, just fun, people to see the other side of Preeti. What's your favorite book? Easy one to start with.
Well, something like, many favorite books. That's why I was contemplating. Do I just find a favorite one? But currently, let me see. I'm reading World as a Family by Vishaka Desai. Vishaka is a professor at Columbia, and she's using the word mutuality. We are all together in self-interest. Call it selfishness or self-interest. So make sure you do good so that your interests are taken care of. So
great. I have not read it, but I heard about the book. So if you're giving it a thumbs up, I'll definitely check it out. So when you're not working, how do you like to spend your time?
Oh, I'm a nature buddy. I am all the time in nature. So I think the nature for me relates to that caring attitude, the peace, the sense of serenity that I get in nature. And therefore, I also paint. I do oil paintings, but most of them are landscapes. Nice. So whenever I can't see nature, I bring nature into my world by oil landscapes.
That actually I did not know. So this is really nice. So I'm a painter as well. So we have to one day paint together. So I guess that takes care of the next question. What is your hidden talent? So sounds like you're a painter. And what other hidden talents are there that we don't know about, Preeti?
Well, I'm somewhat of a yogi because I really believe in keeping, I'm a big follower of Sadhguru. Let me also say that. He's a yogi and mystic out in southern India. If you just listen to his videos, very, very practical for life as well. But I think doing yoga is a scientific way of keeping your body and your organs healthy. It's not poses, it's not anything else. Just please do yoga.
So yes, absolutely. I think I'm a big believer as well. Good. So I think the last question, one reason to be optimistic in 2021, or should I say uber optimistic in 2021?
Oh boy. Well,
almost
I just think
we can't say that it's almost finished. So we still have 2 months left.
Well, I can just say from a professional point of view, we are launching our strategic framework. On 31st of January, we hope the board will approve it. It will have come right after we spent time in Doha with our LDCs. Some of them are with us at COP. So let me get back to you on this journey that we started with our member states, with our 46 countries, Malawi, Gambia, all those wonderful people, Tanzania. And I'm hopeful because I see good leadership coming through here, and I hope that they will be able to enter the global capital markets. And I have to end by saying the DSG, Amina Mohammed said, hope is our only commodity in some ways. And she quoted that, and I'd like to quote her. And especially for the UN, when we face such multilateral, situations where we're going into crisis countries, we're staying in the crisis countries, really hoping that the crisis decrease and we're able to get back there and do our financing. So hope is our commodity.
Right, it definitely is, and I will go with that. So with that, we end our conversation, Preeti. It was wonderful, and I know that we have our listeners with some questions. So I think given I went way over, so I apologize, but it was so much fun listening to Preeti. So maybe we'll do 2 quick questions, if that's okay, Preeti, with you. So Sorel, if you don't mind just jumping in with the questions, we'll pick 2 of the.
Sharing that fantastic discussion, Professor Shanaz and Ms. Sinha. That was really enlightening. My name is Sorel Henrik.
Sorel, we can't hear you. Okay, sorry. We couldn't hear you for a while. Sorry about that.
Okay, I was just saying that it was such a lovely conversation and so informative for all of us, going deep into these topics about innovative finance and the work that both of you are doing as pioneers. We now have a much clearer idea of the challenges and the opportunities too that lie ahead as we count down to 2030. I will now go right into the first question, which is about it's from Michael Snow, and he says, is the UNCDF and IAX investing employee time and resources into looking at how to integrate DeFi into impact investing beyond casual research or platitudes about its innovation potential?
Are we investing employee time? Oh, we are fully investing. I don't think we do much more, but just to say that on a very serious note, that we have a part of our organization called the LDC investment platform, where we are making our impact investments from there. And we have obviously got officers fully focused on the impact measures. We've got results-based specialists. We have our own, it's called the IRM. It's our own, the results framework mechanism, which we'll be happy to share with you. But I know Doreen does even more, so I'll hand it over to her.
Right. No, thanks, Preeti. And I think I don't want to take too much time, but again, Michael, thanks for asking. But all our work is actually, of course, our entire work and the staff, we're completely dedicated on basically using the application of all the decentralized sort of financial mechanism. And in terms of what you refer to as blockchain, is that the question, right? You have Sorel that we have here that he's asking. Because I think there are a few questions here, so I don't know which one it is. But at any event, so I think for us, what we do is we ensure the impact measurement work that we do, it's actually verified, by the people who are being impacted by it. So it really is, if you think of blockchain, it's like, blockchain, kind of spinning it and making sure that it really is ensuring that verification that's happening. So for us, it really is not about just doing the work with the last mile, but very effectively linking risk, return, and impact, the 3 angles that we look at everything very carefully. Sorel, the next question, and I would actually request Denise to pull up the question maybe somehow. I don't know if that's possible when it's being asked.
Okay.
Well, I'm reading them as well. You mentioned it.
Okay, so I'm going to the one all the way at the bottom, which has a like.
Okay.
Does UNCDF see the need to expand its existing scope to amplify the impact it generates? And if so, what potential avenues for expansion can the UNCDF explore?
Thanks, Sorel. This is very, very pertinent. So the UNCDF also serves the rest of the UN agencies. So because we are the only agency that can do these financial products like loans, guarantees, funds, we serve, for example, UN Women, UNFPA, UNEP. And so we not only serve the countries, and we serve the other UN agencies. And when we do that, we can expand into other countries as well. So, for example, we are in Kenya, we're doing a tree forest fund there, and we are in Morocco, we're doing a street lighting fund. So right now we call ourselves a hybrid development agency and a hybrid development finance agency. But we hope in the future, if I may, on this this forum, to hope to be the UN's DFI in some ways, to the extent that the UN does that kind of financing and really add value to the lives there. So thanks for the question.
If we have time for one more, Prof. Shanaz, this is a light one for Ms. Sinha, and it's did you have a role model that you looked up to, and do you have someone that inspired you to become, do all these groundbreaking things that you have done in your career?
Yeah. I mean, here I'll really give credit to my mother, my father as well. I mean, I think the human child needs a secure environment more than, the academics. It's the security. So certainly great inspiration. My mother is a Parsi, a Zoroastrian. My parents had a cross-cultural, multicultural marriage in the 60s. But beyond that, I also grew up in the time of Indira Gandhi, a strong woman leader that led India. But I remember this quote that I wrote for my Dartmouth application, and that was Jawaharlal Nehru. And he said, "I want power, not for the sake of power, but to make history." And I am inspired by that because I'm really very, very humble. And I want to be in a position where I can make a difference. And if that means having this level of, let's say, this platform that I have at UNCDF, I really hope that I'm responsible for that position and that really I'm able to serve the people. I'd love to bring in the word public service into any role that has governance, has power, be really a public servant in the end of the day.
Wow, beautiful words to wrap up the Q&A, I think. So that's a wrap, and what a dynamic discussion about how we're going to bridge this critical financing gap and work on sustainable development and how to do it really for the last mile and for underserved women. Professor Shanaz, Ms. Sinha, Natasha, thank you so much for your contributions tonight and today for those of us who are joining from all over the world. For our annual pass subscribers and backstage pass ticket holders, please stay on for your exclusive extended access to the speakers. To everyone else in our audience, thanks for tuning in, and we hope you walk away feeling more inspired to act with defiant optimism. If you would like to learn more about how you can further scale your impact, please feel free to browse through our catalog on the IIX Institute website. We have courses there taught by leaders in the space, including Professor Shanaz. And we'll be back in 2022 with the next episodes of The Defiant Optimist, with more luminaries in finance, including the CEO of the ANZ Bank, Mr. Shane Elliott, and our Defiant Optimist subscribers will now have special backstage access. So thank you to everyone else who is here tonight, and welcome to this final part of the webinar. So you should all be receiving invitations right now to interact live in the event in our Blue Jeans platform. So if you'd like to turn on your cameras, now's your chance to do so. And I'll turn it back over to you, Professor Shanaz.
Thank you, Sorel. And again, thank you, Preeti. And I think we have some people signing off and some people staying on. So thank you for joining us, and to both the groups, and thank you to all of you for being part of this this journey, that we have through Defiant Optimists, and of course for us to be able to have these incredible leaders, and we are allowing for for some of you to have this backstage pass to be able to ask Preeti and myself any questions. We are actually happy to interact with you and really share things that we didn't have a chance to share in the last 1 hour. So I think with that, I'm just going to ask Preeti if there's anything else you want to chat about, Preeti, that you want the audience to hear that we didn't really have a chance, or the audience to jump in and ask, because I know everyone has access now.
Shanaz, no, just to say that I think I had a chance to really convey what we are doing. And just these travels, unfortunately, have brought me to Sweden, and I actually need to jump off in about 5 minutes. Is that
Sure.
something that's okay? Because I have a
Yeah,
meeting with
absolutely.
Fund. So in the cause of doing more, let me get off and meet with them. But happy to stay on for a couple of more minutes.
Sure. No,
Answer
and I
any.
appreciate it. I think just this is just a couple of minutes just to for the audience. So I think, it's again, I mean, I think for us, I think as we're doing this, I think we do want to find ways for all of you to be a part of this journey. So if you have thoughts, comments, please do let us know. But I think when we are putting these questions together, even for the speakers, it really is for us to kind of figure out how do we really go to the next level in terms of really unlocking capital for the 99%. So for our next series, for our next speaker, which will be in a couple of months, if you want to be a part of it, share questions, please do reach out to us. Sorel, is there anyone who wants to speak? Or is everyone being quiet and shy?
I see a lot of thanks here for, some really great comments about speaking about mutuality, about this economics of mutuality. Thanks to Ms. Sinha for the great session. So I just see a lot of positive feedback for the discussion today. So with that, I think we can wrap up and leave Ms. Sinha to her important work. Yes. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I just really like to add, really, I want to see capital markets act and be very different in 2 years. And I think to Michael Snow's question on blockchain, I mean, these new technologies might allow us to create new forms of capital. The current capital is divided as it is, a bit unequally, as we could say. But I think if we think about future technologies, future ways of working, I hope we can create a more equal world. And I see blockchain as one example of being able to do that, the tokenization. So I believe in that. But thank you so much.
Yes, definitely try new things. Absolutely. Great. Well, Preeti, with that, good luck with your meetings, and bring a lot of money for do awesome things for the world. And thank you for doing what you're doing. My goodness, I mean, you are a warrior out there. So thank you for all your hard work and your belief and your passion. Be the uber optimist. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to be in the same tribe as you are, the Defiant Optimist. Here we are. Let's really make it a better world. I truly believe in it.
We will, absolutely. Okay, take care, and goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.